You know what? I want to make a top 10 Zelda video.
You're doing top 10 videos now? You got to do something in order to make them stand out.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. I'm only going to do one top 10 video, and I'll be homaging someone else's style.
Why would you want to rip off something like Watch Mojo?
Well, so here's the thing. I'm not going to be ripping off Watch Mojo. I'll be ripping off one of the classics. One of the oldies. One of the good ones.
And what's that?
The Legend of Zelda. One of the pioneers in the RPG action-adventure genre. An important pillar in gaming history, and a franchise that continues to innovate to this day with each entry, so much so that each one is considered a masterpiece. However, with that success comes quite a few others wanting to borrow it.
And of course, who's surprised? One of the best games in the NES library and spawned one of the greatest gaming franchises of all time, of course it would have a few imitators. But many people forget, just because it copies something doesn't mean it's not great on its own. Now before we start, a few rules. Number 1, it has to come out after the NES title, but before Breath of the Wild. Let's keep it somewhat interesting. And number 2, most obvious, it's gotta be good. So sorry, no Hydlide.
Hydlide!
So hey, I'm Ramblin' Scott for not Screwattack's Top 10 Zelda Clones.
Number 10!
Oh boy, I can hear some of you reaching for your keyboards now, but wait, stop me if you heard this before. You live a peaceful life in a nice little village until someone you know gets very sick, which means you, along with a flying companion, must go on a quest to recover artifacts, meeting colorful characters along the way, but when you get back, your village is attacked by the main bad guy. We cut to years later, which means you have to go on another quest for different artifacts, go to the places you went before, which are now worse, and once you gathered all these new artifacts, you go back, fight the bad guy, and there's fishing. Yeah, while Nier calls back to other games entirely, the most it calls back to is The Legend of Zelda with its story and some gameplay elements. Now, because of the fact that it's not entirely a Zelda clone, it's so low on the list. That, and it was a toss-up between this and Starfox Adventures, and with that game making some of its players go,
"Can I stop playing the game now?"
It was kind of a done deal to put Nier at this spot. Though, one thing I will say that this game has over The Legend of Zelda, a hottie in a maid outfit that curses.
Now pull your head out of your goddamn ass and start fucking helping us!
Number 9!
What? How the hell can Golden Axe be on this list? Golden Axe is not a Zelda clone, and you're right. Golden Axe is without a doubt far from a Zelda clone as you can get. But we're not talking about the Golden Axe games that all of you guys know and love. We're talking about this one. Yeah. Coming from the Master System, Golden Axe Warrior, while still a fun game, is just a copy and paste of clone of Zelda. And while that's not a bad thing, it goes to show that if something is popular, especially if it's from Nintendo, its rivals are definitely going to want a piece of that Zelda pie.
Number 8!
Okay, I'm gonna take a wild guess and say some of you have no idea what this game is, much like this lady right here. Well, I don't blame you, since this one never really reached outside Japan. Yep, we're doing with a foreign country exclusive here, people. And a pretty good one at that. While the battle system is a little different, For the Frog, the Bell Tolls is a Zelda clone indeed, despite the fact the engine came out before the original Zelda title. Almost everything is the same except for the fact that you can transform into a snake or a frog, giving you different possibilities of approaching a problem, which definitely adds another layer to the puzzle solving. But seriously, it's basically Link's Awakening but with frogs. Not much else to say.
Number 7!
Yeah, you all saw this coming. Of course, as a top 10 Zelda clone video is going to include 3D Dot Hero, one of the best games to take us back to the 8-bit gaming era, full of crafting, puzzles, dungeons, and great combat. The only reason it's not so higher on the list is because of the fact that it can be a bit grindy at times. That and on occasion the graphics can be a bit straining on the eyes. But other than that, the fact that you can wield a sword so big that it would make even Kratos blush, it definitely deserves a spot on the list.
Number 6.
You know, with how popular mobile games have been in the modern day, you'd think Nintendo would have gone on the bandwagon. Yeah, we definitely have some Mario games and that one Animal Crossing one. Ugh. But how come we haven't gotten one for Metroid, or Pikmin, or, dare I say it, The Legend of Zelda? Well, if you were growing up in the 2010s and you kept your eyes on the App Store, you definitely came across this. Well, on first glance, it is basically just Wind Waker on your mobile phone. Oceanhorn, Monster of Uncharted Seas, is pretty fun and it carries the spirit of Wind Waker surprisingly. Granted, because of the fact that it is on the mobile store, you would definitely have to deal with data consumption and frame rates, but nowadays you can actually play it on your Nintendo Switch. And you know what? It's quite good. By the way, this video is sponsored by Race.
Number 5.
Man, in the early 90s, Sega and Nintendo were at the head of the video game industry, cranking out great game after great game. But on retrospective, Nintendo had the edge in the video game library. Whether it be on the NES or SNES, Nintendo's games had a lot more variety to them and were just a lot more fun. Whether it be Donkey Kong Country, Super Metroid, or F-Zero, the one that definitely made us really go, yeah, Nintendo, was A Link to the Past. Considered by many to be the greatest Zelda game of all time, it definitely made us Nintendo kids look at those stuck with the Sega Genesis and laugh. But, little did we know, those who owned a Sega Genesis weren't missing out on the Zelda craze, because turns out they had Crusader of Centy. While on the surface it is basically just a clone of Link to the Past, Crusader of Centy is definitely a compelling game, with fun combat, great bosses, and an interesting story to boot. Not to mention, you can throw your sword like a boomerang. I'm going to repeat that for the kids in the back who couldn't hear the awesomeness of that phrase. Throw your sword like a boomerang. Fucking Daniel.
Number 4.
Ever wonder what it'd be like if you 95'd the original Zelda game? Yeah, well, that's not really a question everyone was asking, but yeah. Mostly well known for its advertisement in Gaming Pro magazine, Startropics was a game that almost every kid in the 90s had in their NES collection. You basically play the original NES classic, beating up all sorts of spooky monsters with, oh no, not a Master Sword, a yo-yo. Because every kid in the 90s had a yo-yo, am I right? Take that, Jack Skellington. They say always judge a book by its cover. Not really. It's like the other way around. Something like that. At first glance, Darksiders does look like a generic hack and slash akin to Devil May Cry or even Dante's Inferno. But on closer inspection, when you reach the dungeons, that's when its Zelda side starts to show. Aside from the Zelda elements that make it really cool, a compelling story where you play as the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, needing to battle demons and angels, taking down Titan-sized bosses, and having Mark Hamill at your side as a demon ghost fairy, what's not to love? Granted, originally we were going to put Darksiders 1 on here, but because Darksiders 2 lets you play as the awesomeness that is death, we're putting both on here. Who wouldn't want to play a game where you play as the Grim Reaper, dude?
If it's madness, then who better to show me the way?
Number 2.
Okay, now we're getting into some nasty territory. Many gamers were not expecting this when it first came on the scene, but when they got their hands on it, oh boy did it knock their socks off. The Binding of Isaac is essentially a one long Zelda dungeon, as well as kind of a shoot 'em up. Both gaming aspects make this an instant classic, with its replayability, multiple endings, mom's stinky ass foot, unlockables, fun ass bosses, and of course just how nasty it is. Seriously, the amount of nasty that is put into this game is the same amount that puts it into what makes it awesome. Alright, let's hit that recap before we hit number 1. Number 10, Hades That Curse. Number 9, Golden Axe Warrior. Number 8, From the Frog the Bell Tolls. Number 7, 3D Dot Heroes. Number 6, Oceanhorn. Number 5,
Boomerang Sword?
Number 4, Startropics. Number 3, Darksiders 1 and 2. And number 2, The Binding of Isaac.
It's number 1.
When it comes to imitating something as great as Zelda, you need to do a couple of things. not only imitate some of the best parts, but also have enough originality and personality to stand on your own 2 legs. Or in this case, 4 legs. Because no other game on this list does it just as good as Okami. Man, what can be said about this game? Not only does it have some of the best aspects of the Zelda franchise, but has enough personality to really stand out from the crowd. It has a unique way of approaching combat with the Celestial Brush tool, fantastic and memorable side characters, a wide variety of enemies, its unconventional approach to storytelling calling back to the old ways we told these old myths, the most beautiful graphics that will stand the test of time, a fantastic soundtrack, fun as hell writing, great world building, emotional scenes that will really make you feel for the characters, and just, this game is so good! It's a shame that it hasn't reached mainstream appeal. That's right. To this day, it still holds the Guinness Book of World Records that had the most positive critical reception, but poor sales. That's right, this game is officially underrated. If you haven't played this game, I highly recommend you go out and buy a copy. It's available for almost every system under the sun. For not only is it a great Zelda clone, it's a great game overall.
And that does it for this Screwattack's Top 10. And even though this was an homage video, and if by some chance Stuttering Craig watches this, thanks for the great content. Inspired me a lot in middle school. It made some good stuff. Shut the fuck up!
Upsetting. You're an upsetting person.